Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Today, we're making photography simple. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast, a weekly podcast for those who believe that moments matter most and that a beautiful photo is more than just a sum of its settings. A show for those who want to do more with the gear they have to take better photos today. And now, your host, Raymond Hatfield.
Hey everybody, Raymond here from the Beginner Photography Podcast. As always, I am happy to be hanging out with you today. All of my photo friends, this community that we got going on, within the Beginner Photography Podcast is something that over the years I've truly grown to love and appreciate and enjoy spending time with you all and helping you out when it comes to, learning photography and anything that you are looking to learn and help you progress your skills. So the fact that you continue to show up week after week, I just have to say thank you so much for your love and your support of the show. So today we are talking with there's a really good chance you know who today's guest is. It is Miguel Quiles, and he has a very popular YouTube channel where he is also educating photographers in all sorts of things. He's a portrait photographer by profession, and he shares a lot of interesting tips and tricks and tools that you can use as a portrait photographer and just capturing better photos. One reason why I reached out to Miguel is that he's just, you watch his YouTube videos and you're like, this dude's really down to earth and is also very knowledgeable about photography. And what I loved about this is that it was great that, he really is that person. It's not a show or anything when you see him on YouTube. It is exactly how he is in real life by talking to him. So this is a really great episode. I truly enjoyed it. And I know that you will too, because we're going to talk a lot about, photography, getting started in photography, those earliest struggles that you have in photography that Miguel had and kind of how he overcame them. And then also for premium members, Miguel shares a ton of things just for you. As I said, not only is he has a big YouTube following, very popular YouTube channel, but also, he's a professional photographer, so he's got to make money as well with his photography. So today I dialed it back and I wanted to know about kind of those earliest days in his beginnings in photography, specifically how to deal with exposure. Oftentimes a brand may reach out and say, if you do these photos for us, we'll give you exposure. So kind of how to navigate that world, what you can do with that, how to determine what opportunity is going to be a good opportunity, what you can do after the shoot to actually, make money yourself, and then even how to word agreements that you have before a shoot to set yourself up for potential shoots there in the future. And then of course, what sorts of things Miguel sees or did that also sabotaged his own sales. So again, we talk about a ton here today just for premium members, and I know that you are going to fully enjoy it and get a lot out of this one. So if you want to hear the answers that Miguel shares all about, earning money with his camera, then become a premium member today by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and clicking the premium membership button at the top of the page. You'll also get access to an entire back catalog of premium interviews where other world-class photographers are sharing their best tips on how to earn money with their camera, as well as tons of premium trainings just for growing, building, starting a business. Specifically right now, we're talking all about Facebook ads and how to set those up for success so that you can start getting clients right away. So with that, again, head over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com, click the premium membership button at the top of the page to join today. And with that, let's get on into this interview with Miguel Quiles. You are obviously you're a portrait photographer, you're an educator, you have a lot of things going on, and you have a very sizable YouTube audience as well. And I think one thing that makes you stand out among other photography educators on YouTube is that not only do you have the experience, but you have this way of breaking down what are sometimes complex situations into something that just about any photographer can understand. And I think that a lot of photographers really value that experience. I can hear that in your voice. But, as another photographer, I know that this didn't happen overnight. You didn't like wake up one day, you had the camera, you had all the knowledge. This started sooner than that. So before we get to where you are today, can we talk about kind of those early days in photography and how you even got started in the first place?
For sure. So I actually got started in photography, and by the way, thank you for that. That's definitely something that I'm very mindful of when I create content and whenever I try to teach other people photography. But really, it started for me when I like right out of high school. You know, I wasn't big into photography growing up as a youngster. I basically started in photography right out of high school. Started working at a retail store. It was a consumer electronics store that happened to sell photography and video equipment, and we were commission based. So in the store, the things that we would get paid the most on or have the most opportunity to make money in general was with photography. Because obviously, if you come in to buy a DVD player, you buy a DVD player and you're out the door, versus you come in to buy a camera and you're buying a camera body, a lens, filters, batteries, memory cards, film, you know, flashes, all kinds of stuff. So there was just a lot more opportunity to make money at that time. And so I'm very simplistic when I learn things. I'm not that guy that, you know, hears very technical stuff and retains it. I have to really kind of water things down a little bit for me to understand it. And so that's kind of what I did. I watered down the whole process of photography so that I could understand it. And then as people would come in looking to start and buy their first camera, buy their first lens, buy their first flash, you'd have to have conversations with them to help them understand why they needed these things. And so I learned really early on to really just explain things in a very simple way so that obviously at that time so that I could make money, you know, selling those cameras and accessories, because if they didn't understand what the purpose was, they would never buy it. And oftentimes they needed these things based on what they were telling me, the use cases that they had. They needed some of these things. And it was really important for me to make sure that I didn't mess that up for them, you know, and tell them things in a really complex way to where they're like, yeah, that raises a lot more questions. Let me come back. And then they don't. And then they continue on and they take terrible pictures, and then it's my fault, or at least I felt that way. So, so that was really my thing. And then as I started my career in photography, this was, so we're talking from 1999 is when I started. And then going to 2011 is when I started to pursue this professionally. And I had some knowledge, I had some experience with taking photos, but I would not put myself anywhere in the category of being a professional, but I was just getting things going. And I realized as I looked at the industry at that point, trying to figure out, okay, how do I learn photography where I'm at right now? Who do I go to? Where do I go? And I would see some of the resources that were available at the time. And a lot of the resources tend to talk about photography in terms that are so magical and so mystical and so, you know, like they just perform this complex brain surgery, you know, and doing it in such a way where it's like, well, I did this and you're probably not going to be able to do this, but I'm just going to show you anyway. And I don't know, I would watch some of these things and go to some of these workshops and listen to these lectures, and it just sounded very pretentious, and it bugged me. And I said, you know, if I ever get to the point to where I know a thing or two, I want to be able to be that resource for other people that I could, like, that I wanted for myself when I started. And so that's really where the journey started, was trying to learn photography. And then also, if I decided to go the route of teaching people, that I would be that resource that made things as easy as possible to digest. I don't want someone to look at what I do and be like, oh my gosh, he's so magical and mystical, and I could never do what he does, and he's just amazing. Like, I would rather you look and be like, wow, that he made that look really easy. I think I could do that too. You know, that's like the best, to me, in a strange way, that's like the best compliment, you know, like, you make things look really easy, like I could do it too. And and people can, and that's what I try, and I try to make sure that I explain things in a way that people can do just that.
Yeah, it seems like 99, 2000, 2005, 6, when there wasn't YouTube, when there wasn't a lot of information readily available, it's like photographers kind of had to guard themselves and their quote unquote like industry secrets for how to get a
Hmm.
great photo. Whereas today, like there is a lot of information available, but there is still some of that air of like, well, I'm doing it this way, and therefore, it does kind of feel magical. And I never really had thought about it that way until you broke it down. I think once again, it's just a testament to your ability to do that, kind of get people to think differently. But I want to go back to when you were, selling camera gear. You said that you wanted to learn as much as you could about the photography so that you could recommend, the right products and whatnot. Were you actively shooting at this time, or were you just reading the literature?
I was definitely an active shooter. I was really big into the car club scene at that point in time. So I spent a lot of money on my car, buying rims and body kits and car audio and going to car shows and car meetups and things of that nature. So, and I had a lot of friends who had really nice cars as well. So I would take my camera and basically go to these meetups and try to take the best car photos that I could take. I would see all these amazing vehicles, and I'm trying to like find cool angles to make their cars look really awesome, and just kind of doing it as a hobby, photographing models at these car tuner events and stuff like that, which was like the easiest thing in the world because they just basically sit on the car. It's
Yeah.
like you really don't do much. It's like beautiful car, beautiful model. They sit on the hood or they sit on the door, look pretty. You take a couple snaps, thank you, and you kind of just move on. And so I did a lot of that, and then ultimately just kind of took my camera with me everywhere and just started taking pictures everywhere, going out on the weekends with friends and not just taking pictures, but also shooting video. I would take little mini DV camcorder and we go to the skating rink with friends, and I'd be the guy who can't really ice skate for anything, but I'm out there with, my camcorder trying to like hobble on the ice, trying to keep up with my friends and shooting video. And I still have a lot of those mini DV tapes. I need to get those things transferred over
Yeah, you
because I
do.
feel like there's some gold in there somewhere. But but yeah, so that was kind of my thing starting out, was just like in order for you to really be a resource, or at least I felt this at the time, to be a resource to my customers that were coming in who, had very real world use cases for these cameras, I needed to take these same pieces of equipment out into the real world, test them out, figure out what works, what doesn't work, and it made me a valuable asset to the team because most of the people that were there, the other sales reps that were there, they had experience with this equipment, but they weren't actively using it. So a lot of what they were saying, to be honest, was like made up BS. They'd say, "Oh yeah, this weekend I had the same situation, and I bought this $5,000 camera, and it took care of everything." And meanwhile, I'm just sitting there like, "But you don't really need that though. Why are you
Yeah.
saying that? You didn't take a camera out this weekend. You were watching the football game. Like, don't lie
Yeah.
to these people." So
But looking for that commission, I could see
yeah,
that happening a lot. I mean, that's kind of where the term like sleazy salesperson comes from. And I think that
that's
a lot of people as like new photographers get burned from that because we're sold that the better the camera, the better the photos that we're going to be taking.
true.
And as you said, that's obviously not always the case. But
Mm-mm.
gear is still something that a lot of photographers have questions about. They don't know too much about. They're looking for guidance. And you yourself, you're a Sony Artisan, correct?
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
I've been fortunate to be a Sony ambassador, a Sony artisan since 2015. So almost 6 years. I think April or May will make 6 years.
Well,
Still can't believe it.
congratulations. Yeah,
Thank you.
that's
It's
that's
crazy.
amazing. So I'm really interested to hear your perspective as an artisan who obviously you want to use the best gear that you need to do the job, but
Hmm.
also there's this kind of dichotomy because we both know that you know the better the camera isn't going to make the best photo, and that a great photo is more than the sum of its settings. So can
Hmm.
you talk about kind of that balance there a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that it's a really tricky, I don't know, it's like it's a bit of a paradox because on the one hand, when you start out, you kind of just start out with what you have and you do the best that you can do. And you start to realize as you use kind of like basic equipment after some period of time, you start to learn what the limitations are and you learn how to overcome those limitations. But then at some point, when you start to really like find your stride and you start to get better, maybe you start making a little bit of money out of photography, you get to the point where you're like, why am I making myself go through this when I could just buy something else that works better? And so, I could see where somebody who's starting out would look at that person and be like, oh, well, you're relying a lot on the gear. You could do the same thing with something cheaper, and you can, but it's just like cars. Like I look at photography and cameras and gear just like cars, being that I was a car guy back in the day. And it's like you can get from point A to point B with a skateboard, or you can get to point A from point A to point B with a Lambo. They both do the job. One does it in a completely different way than the other. One isn't better than the other. I would enjoy riding a skateboard over to the corner store, but I'm pretty sure I would enjoy it in a Lambo as well. So, the experience is different. And I think that as you progress in photography and as you get better and as you start potentially making it into a professional career, it becomes more important for you to be able to reduce the friction that can happen between you and your equipment when you're taking photos. Because if you do that, then you have the ability to focus on other things that truly are more important than the gear and the settings and all that kind of stuff. Being a portrait guy, like I'm working with people all the time, not just with the clients, but sometimes working with hairstylists, makeup artists, videographer. Like there's a bunch of other people that are on set that have to be looked after, and talked to and motivated and encouraged and, whatever. And I'm not able to do that if I'm using equipment that is drawing time and attention away. So, so I think that if you're starting out, and even if you're into it for a few years, you can get a lot of mileage out of beginner entry level stuff. But I think that as you find success and as you start making money, you kind of owe it not just to yourself, but you owe it to your clients to make sure that you have gear that just gets out of the way, and that's for me what it's all about. Like as I've upgraded lighting and lenses and, bought like special gear over the years, it's all really been less about like, oh, this gear is so awesome. And it's more of like, I don't have to worry about this. And now I could focus on the person and talking to them and getting them hyped up about the shoot, because those are the things that are going to it's going to result in better photographs, is really developing those relationships. And so that's kind of where the gear thing is for me nowadays.
Yeah. Especially where, as time goes on, every year we have like such better and better cameras. I was talking to somebody just the other day, who was worried about like grain in their images, and I said, I
Hmm.
legitimately don't think that in like 4 years we're going to be talking about grain anymore, because no matter what camera you buy, it's just going to be like so good. There's going to be some sort of computational photography that's going to take care of issues like that's going to become a non-issue. But when you had started back, even in 2011, I mean, was that the T3i, the like that
Hmm.
series of cameras, right?
Yep. That was
So,
that was the first one I started with.
oh, well then perfect. So then
Yep.
what were, when you got that camera, what were kind of those technical limitations that you had to overcome? Because I'm sure before that, everybody's just shooting an auto, you just kind of do snapshots, disposable cameras, things like that. Was that you, or did you already have a really solid technical understanding of photography?
No, I would say I was more at that point in time an auto shooter. I had a little tiny bit of an eye for composition, had way more in terms of social skills to be able to talk to people and get them comfortable in front of the camera. But then behind the camera, I definitely had a lot of technical and artistic growth to be experienced. But I think for me, I started out with a Canon Rebel T3i. That was my first camera. Back then, at that point, I would spend a lot of time playing Magic the Gathering. I actually had fancied myself as an aspiring professional Magic the Gathering player and would go to tournaments and, thought that's what I wanted to do. And then just kind of like one day was looking around like, okay, I don't know that this is a professional environment when I'm sitting at a store playing with like a bunch of people with their butt cracks hanging out. It just didn't feel like it didn't feel like a legitimate thing. And so I sold my cards, bought a T3i, and I didn't really understand what the limitations were because I didn't know about photography enough to make those decisions. But I took a workshop really early on. Might have even been like a Groupon thing where they were like, yeah, go for this all day workshop. And it was like 60 or 70 bucks and we'll teach you how to shoot in manual mode. And sure enough, it worked. And I learned how to shoot in manual mode. And shortly after that, and I mean like within a week or two, I realized like, okay, this T3i has some shortcomings, mainly being that it didn't have a lot of focus points. So there were times where I was trying to take photographs that, portraits and things of that nature, and they were coming out of focus. And that was really super annoying. So fortunately, I was still within the return policy, went back to the store, and they had the 60D on sale that had the better kit lens, and it was like a $250 difference or something. So I immediately returned it, got the 60D, and then started using that. And still had some limitations, but I had a little less than what I had with the T3i. And so really it was just a matter of just the focus points, not really being plentiful for me to be able to compose the shots in a way that would make it easy to get shots in focus. And then having shutter speeds that were like, I think the T3i was like 1/4000 or 1/5000th of a second was like the max. And you'd be shooting outdoors with that, I call it the Cracker Jack lens, that 50 millimeter 1.8 that feels
yes.
like,
Yeah.
it's the plastic fantastic. And, and I would go out and shoot with this thing. And there was just a lot of times where I'm like, man, this gear is not getting me to where I want to get to. And so those are really the main reasons why. Just there weren't enough focus points, and it just made getting the eyes in focus, which I was told at that time was exceedingly important in portrait photography. It made it really hard, and it was super annoying. And I'd take some shots that looked beautiful, play them back on the screen. I'm like, yes, I got the shot. And then I zoom into it, and the eyes are just like, I get the tip of the nose in focus, or, the background. I'm just like, oh, I just want to give up.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are going to, relate to that as well, because it's hard when you first get started to, not only understand the technicals because you got so many new things to think about, but also have to worry about your focus point and where it's at and, why is it not doing these things. But it sounds to me like within that very short amount of time, you went from knowing a little bit about photography to knowing a great deal about the technical side of photography. Today, do you consider yourself, now that you've been doing this for, quite a number of years, do you consider yourself more of a technical photographer? Like, is that where your brain goes, or is it more of that artistic side?
I still consider myself more of a technical photographer, but, but I say that, and I don't say it in such a way to mean that like I'm a technician. Like I'm not saying it in that way. I'm saying my brain is wired more towards the technical side of imagery. But, also on the other side of the coin, like I'm very much a student. So like, I'm very much like, I've met a lot of people who have been doing this for a long time, and a lot of people who really kind of like, they're feeling themselves, and I'm the type of person, like I'm very technical, but at the same time, I'm very curious, and I'm very much a student, and I'm always trying to learn, always trying to get better. I always feel like every photo shoot that, comes in the future, that I'm always like improving and I'm always doing better. And, so that's kind of where my mentality is. I'm definitely more technically minded, but at the same time, it's paired with this student-like curiosity, where I always want to learn more. I want to learn different perspectives, different ways of doing things, just so that I can improve my own technique moving forward.
Do you have an example of a recent example of where you showed up to a shoot feeling good and you just came at it with that curiosity type mindset and you learned something new?
Yeah, I mean, I had a photo shoot this weekend. Actually, I was doing a Sony virtual event. It was a B Alpha event, and I was doing a live photo shoot with the new Sony A1, and there was very little in terms of preparation for this shoot. I really wanted to approach the photo shoot in such a way where it wasn't super planned out. I told the makeup artist and the hairstylist to kind of just do their thing, and it was very similar to how it was when I first started in photography, because I didn't really know. I know what to tell them now in terms of like what I want, but when I first started, I didn't. And they would come in and I would say, I don't know, just make them look good. And and then the model would show up with whatever they brought, and they're like, oh, what do you want to go with? And I'm like, whatever makes you feel good, whatever makes you, because when you get in front of the camera, if you're wearing something that you don't like, then obviously that's going to show. So which one of these outfits make you feel your best? Let's go with that one. And then it would be more a thing of me just trying to figure things out. And so that's very similar to what happened this weekend. I'm kind of busy with preparing, the technical portion of this live stream and all that. And hairstylist, makeup artist did their thing. Model just kind of got ready, and I'm thinking, okay, so I want to do something with flowers, but I don't necessarily know what I want to do. And like many things in life, you just start working through it. You throw something up against the wall and you say, okay, is this going to work? And either it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, you pivot and you try something different. And I don't know, for me, fortunately, I felt like the photos came out really nice. And I felt like the instruction was accessible to hopefully the people that were watching. But yeah, I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, I feel like it's a common thing that every photo shoot, you try to extend yourself and do something a little different, and you just try it out. And if it works, great, you keep going. And if it doesn't work, then you just pivot and try something different. Or maybe you fall back on what you do best, what comes to be second nature for you. And that's okay too. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we do as photographers, right? Like we have an idea of like where we want to go with things, and then you just pivot when it doesn't work out.
Did you have a backup plan for this? Like if the flower idea that you had didn't work, would you
Mm-hmm.
have done something different with the flowers, or would you have resulted back to what it is that you do best?
Yeah, I definitely would have gone back to like what I felt most comfortable doing. I'd be like, okay, let's just go back to that most basic of portraiture, and really just focus on mood and feeling and expressions, and and maybe I would have reincorporated those flowers at that point. But that's typically what I do. I if I have a new idea, I'll go ahead and explore that idea. And if I feel like it's not working, then maybe I put a pause on it. I may not completely just kill the idea altogether. I'll just say, okay, let's put the flowers down for a second. Let's just focus on like getting warmed up, you getting warmed up with your expressions, and then we'll just reincorporate the flowers. And I'm not telling him that, but that's the mindset. That's kind of where my mind is going, and we just kind of work through it.
Yeah, of course. So with having gone from, we all know that some of our earliest photos like aren't our best, but today
Mm-hmm.
you have a voice, you have a style of photo that you go after. So when I asked you there, would you go back to what it is that you do best? I could see in your body language just kind of got more comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
when we go back to that. So could you maybe explain to me a little bit more about what are the maybe 2 or 3 elements that go into one of your photos that make it uniquely you? Like, what do you go after every time you have somebody come in front of the camera?
It's a great question. I mean, I would say the 2 things that I look for is good lighting. Definitely is going to be the big thing. And then secondarily, somebody who is, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, Malleable, I guess, in front of the camera. You know,
Hmm.
somebody who is comfortable enough to be able to explore a wide range of emotions to give me the best opportunity to photograph them and make them look awesome. And so, that could be there and that could be great. And you could have somebody who's in front of the camera who's just killing it and making it really easy for me to take a great portrait of them. But if the lighting's not on point and I'm not shooting them in the best light to really kind of those, flatter whatever it is that they're doing and whatever they're giving to me as a photographer, then, that's where it's a balance. Like I try to make sure the lighting looks great and that the person is not just a dud in front of the camera. They're not just a lump on a log. Like, um, even to some extent, I feel like a lot of other things are forgiven so long as those two things are there. You can almost be forgiven for a shot that's a little bit out of focus if the lighting is great and the expression is killer.
Mm.
But I feel like if those two things are lacking, you could have everything else like spot on. You mentioned grain earlier. Like you could have a shot that's a little bit grainy, but if the lighting's good and the expression is killer or the pose is great, like you have a good shot. People will just be like, oh yeah, it's a beautiful shot. It's got character, it's got grit,
Right.
versus like, it could be the sharpest photo in the world with some really poor lighting and a bad expression. And it's like,
Who
you
cares?
try again. Yep.
Yeah.
Try again
Yeah.
next time.
That's too funny. I've told this on the podcast several times before, but the first wedding that I had shot on my own, I was so obsessed with like the technicals that I shot that first dance at ISO 100 just to give it that best
Ooh,
grain. No light,
yeah.
no light, just like
Oh,
party lights. And every photo was an exposure of like half a second. I mean, it was just
oh, wow.
terrible. They didn't,
It's just a
you know,
wedding of ghosts.
That's exactly what it was. And they ended up using a cell phone photo. Now, this is from
Ooh,
2012, a cell phone photo of that first dance as like their profile picture. And I remember thinking, like, at that moment, I was like, technicals do not matter when like in a situation like this where like this is all about the moment, and that really helped me
right.
kind of get over it, kind of in that same situation. So let's go ahead and switch gears here a little bit, because I know that you've been a professional photographer for a while, and I want to talk a little bit more about the business side,
Hmm.
coming from the perspective of new photographers. We get a lot of inquiries for exposure, essentially, right? Like,
Hmm.
hey, come do this, shoot it for us for free. We're not going to pay you anything, but guess what? Maybe we have a sizable Instagram or something like that, and we're going to talk about you on our Instagram. And these
Hmm.
deals, we all know that exposure, all exposure is not equal. Exposure from
Sure.
one brand is going to be different from somebody else. So can you talk to me about how do we know if the exposure that we're being promised is actually worth anything?
You're listening to the free version of the Beginner Photography Podcast, where each week you learn how world class photographers see and capture the world around them. If you want to hear the extended interview with their best business tips to learn how to make money with your camera, then become a premium member today by heading over to beginnerphotographypodcast.com and click the premium membership button to join now.
But it goes back to what you were saying there, which is that, if you don't feel imposter syndrome, then you got bigger problems. You got bigger
It's
problems.
true.
I think that's something that, so many people who are listening right now are going to feel like in their bones, because, when you first get started on anything, I don't remember where I saw it, but there's like this, it's like a meme, it's like a graph, and it's like everybody's like knowledge of photography. It's like right in the beginning, oh, I don't know anything. Like once they learn what aperture is, it's like all the way up at the top, like, oh, I'm a
Right, right.
pro. And then once they learn about, inverse square law, it's like, oh, wait, I know nothing. And then it just goes right back down again.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's kind of like with everything in photography, and especially if you're going to start a business and start charging, and you got to worry about all those things that aren't photography related at all. So that was awesome. That was awesome. Let's talk now about the overall progression to kind of get you to where you are today. Earlier I asked, what elements go into a Miguel Quiles photo, right? Like, what are you
Mhm.
looking for here? Can you think back to some of those earliest photos and think about them in your head, and like, what were the elements that you saw in those that now today you're like, oh, I would totally do these things different?
I would say the biggest elements were just poor directional lighting. I would look at a photo back then in a holistic manner where I would just kind of look at the photo as a whole and be like, yeah, I like that photo. That looks good. And then now understanding lighting a little bit better, quality of light, direction of light. I will look at some of those photos now and be like, ooh, that lighting was like almost on point, but there's this weird shadow coming off the nose that makes their nose look a little bit bigger than it actually is. Or the lighting's a little bit too high, so they have a lot of light in there or a lot of shadows in their eye sockets, and it's making them look kind of menacing when we're trying to go for a different vibe. So I tend to critique those earlier photos a little bit heavier now, more from a lighting perspective, but also too the expressions back then. I kind of talked about how I'm very much like a technical person, and when I would take these photos back in the day, if I got something that I thought technically looked great, I'd be patting myself on the back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it's lit, it's exposed right, it's sharp, pat myself on the back. Good job, Miguel. But looking back on those same photos, I'm like, ooh, but that expression though, they're just kind of like they're out to lunch.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing going on in between, the lens and the eyes. Like it's just there's nothing. And so now that's something that I tend to look for quite a bit in my own photographs, beyond just the technical side being good enough, beyond it being passable, but just like, what is this photo saying to me? What is she saying or he saying to me through their pose, through their expression, through what they're wearing, through the way that it's lit? Is there something more here? Is there more depth to this image than just like a standard picture of a person or a thing? And that's something that back in the day, my brain wouldn't even go there. Like it
Yeah,
was
right.
just very surface level. Like, yeah, it's exposed good, it's sharp, call it a day. So I think that's something that comes with time and with experience. And hopefully you start to critique your work a little bit more and you try to think, well, what would have made this image better? And for me, that actually comes from me looking at classic great portraits, and great images from the past, from the legends that came way before us. And what did they see when they took a photograph? And we were talking about grainy photographs and stuff like that. I bought a autobiography from Richard Avedon.
Oh
It's this
wow.
thick book.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking at it off camera right now. It's probably like a, I don't know, inch and a half, 2 inch thick book of photographs that he's taken. And I was shocked because Richard Avedon is like a legend, and you look through these photos and there's a bunch of them that are blurry, there's a bunch that are out of focus, there's a bunch that are grainy. And as a artist in 2021, you'd look at those photos and you're just like, man, technically these are not good.
Mm-hmm.
but then you realize like, okay, he's Richard Avedon though, and the guy's a legend, and his photos will be remembered long after I'm gone. So maybe there's something that I could learn here. And when I look at those photographs, what I do see is a lot of heart, and I see a lot of expression, and I see a lot of just more than a shot that's out of focus, more than a shot that's blurry, more than a shot that has the craziest grain of all time. You see something else that's deeper and more impactful, and that's what I want in my images. So
So how do you, are these questions that you're asking yourself while you're shooting? Like, how can I put more of myself into these images? How can I get more heart out of these images? Or does this come after you're reviewing the photos?
it definitely comes during the process of taking the photo. And it has very little to do with the equipment and the gear and the settings, and it just has more to do with my exploration of the person that I'm photographing and getting them to just like open up and
Mm-hmm.
and 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 give the camera whatever that is. I personally am the barrier to making that happen. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that's what I put on myself as the photographer. Like it's up to me to like break that ice and to find that masterpiece, within the person that's in front of the camera. And so I'm very much aware of it, but I'm also aware of the fact that like that's on me to talk to the person and get them comfortable and get them in a mode to where they're willing to give it to me, and where they understand that if they do give it to me, that I'm going to photograph it and I'm going to make them look awesome. And I think that that's the hard part, because there are times where people want to psychologically, emotionally, but they're like, this photographer is not going to capture it anyway, because it's like I don't even want to go there because they're just not going to capture it anyway. So I'll just stay in that like first gear,
Yeah.
and meanwhile I'm trying to push them to get into that second and third and fourth and fifth gear. And it takes a lot of work. I'll go home exhausted emotionally and physically, every which way you can think of after a photo shoot, because I'm really trying to get that person to go outside of where they would normally be when they're in front of a camera, because that's what's going to set those images apart from images that other people are going to take. I always, starting out, and I still do this, and I don't tell people this often, but like when I take photos of people, I genuinely strive to get the best photo of them than they've ever had. And they'll say, "Oh, I really love my photos," but what really like speaks to me and makes me happy and know that I did a good job is when I see they change their profile photo on social media,
Yeah.
and like I know, okay, yeah. And especially if they've worked with like really great photographers, and then I see that they've, you know, chosen my photo to like represent them on social media, I'm like, I got something that these people didn't get, regardless of their skill and talent and everything else. And 9 times out of 10, what that is just that ability to pull something out of them that maybe other people were not able to do.
First of all, I love that you tied in another car analogy there with the first gear all the way up to fifth gear. That was great. I could tell that
What
you're
I
a
do.
car guy at heart. Yeah, that was awesome. And second of all, I mean, I think that when you see that somebody uses your photo as their profile picture, uh, and especially like if that is your I guess standard or that's your gauge to see how well you did during a shoot. That's something awesome to work towards. I don't think that there's anything wrong about that, or I feel like I can hear people saying like that's a little bit of ego, but I feel like you
Hmm.
have to have some of that as a photographer to have that confidence in yourself, to be able to go after it and take it and own it, and that was awesome to hear. And that was awesome to hear. Uh, Miguel, I know that I've kept you now longer than we had than I had told you that I would. So I really do appreciate your time today. Before I let you go, can you share with the listeners anywhere and everywhere where they can find and follow you online?
Absolutely. So the best place these days to follow me is through my website, through miguelquiles.com. Through the website, you can get to the other social media portals where I share stuff. I've got a Facebook group, which is Improve Your Photography with Miguel Quiles. So if you just search Improve Your Photography, you'll see the Facebook group pop up. And then if you want to learn photography or learn about gear, equipment, things of that nature, just search me on YouTube. I've got videos on my own YouTube channel. I create videos for the official Sony YouTube channel, which is Alpha Universe. I have videos on Adorama TV. I've got videos all over the place. So if the way that I teach things, if it's simple and basic enough, and you enjoy it, then definitely check me out on YouTube, because it's a whole lot more of that.
Clear and concise, man. I'm telling you, Miguel just has this great way of breaking down, sometimes complex, ideas into very simple words that help you truly understand what it is that's going on. And I love, it seems like it really came from his earliest beginnings in photography when he was selling cameras. He had to figure out what was the most important factors and when would you actually use them. And that's it, really. Like, that was the most important thing. And then from there, obviously, it gets branched out, Now, what do I need to do for this shoot? How do I break it down and make this as easy as possible? And of course, he translates that into his education as well, which I am super grateful for, and I know that you are as well. So be sure to check out Miguel on YouTube. I posted a link in the show notes, of course, of this episode for you to be able to find him and all of the awesome photography education that he has on his YouTube channel. Speaking of which, now that I think about it, it is April, of course, which means that there is a new theme for Photo Minute Monday in the group. So this month, we're talking all about exposure. So last month we talked all about composition. Every Monday I put out a new video about composition, when to know what to use and what compositions that you should be trying out as a new photographer and focusing on. This month it is all about exposure. So things like, what is exposure? How do you change exposure? What is the correct exposure? These types of things in just little short, bite-sized, quick videos for you to consume, think about, and then put into practice. So if you want to learn more about exposure and getting, better photos, then feel free to come on into the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook community by just searching Beginner Photography Podcast on Facebook, and you will find it right there. Go ahead, come on in, join us. We would love to have you. So that is it for this week. Until next week, I want you to keep shooting. Just shoot as much as you can. Capture things that you didn't know that you wanted to capture or think that you could capture. Just start shooting, because the more that you shoot, the better that you will learn. All right, that is it. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.
I try to be as honest as possible when I answer these questions, and I think that's good and bad sometimes, because
Why is that
there
bad?
are, well, it's bad to some extent where like people kind of want you to embellish a little bit. It's like when you get to a certain point in your career, I think people kind of like, they want you to embellish a little bit, and they almost are like disappointed when you're just like, meh, I just do basic stuff. And that you really believe it, and it's like they're like, but no, like they want you to be something that you're not really trying to be.
Right,
And
right.
so to some extent, like that can hinder you, but it's what I believe, and it's the way I feel, and it's just like, I'm not about trying to be somebody I'm not, or put myself out there as being more than what I actually am. Like, I just do what I do. Some people vibe with it and go with it, and other people are just like, he's too basic. I'm like, that's fine too.